Hello.
Liz and Letitia, we're going to make you co-host so that you can be able to share your screen. We're waiting for IT to get that done. I think IT's the host because I'm not, and I'm not sure if Daniel is.
Yeah, it doesn't look like I got host capabilities.
Yeah. All right. IT's supposed to be hitting up build any second now, so.
I see that Ilda has sharing capabilities now. She's now the host.
It's 4:01. We'll give it one more minute before we start up. Jeff, do we need to give, who else needs to have hosting rights though? Dr. Bradley,
I'm gonna share for us, and then Dr. Ramirez will need it as well.
okay. Do you have it yet? It's just Ilda that has it right now?
I now can share.
You now can't, okay. All right, Ilda, I'm not sure if we can have more than one co-host, but it would be good if I did too, so I can control the room.
And Daniel, recording is in progress already.
Yep, okay. I don't think, okay, I do. All right, cool. All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting over, meeting to order at 4:02. I'll do roll call from the list. for the people who I see that are here, that are on the committee. So I'm going to start with, let me see, is going down the list. Dr. Bond is here. Gloria, I don't see her. Jeffrey Kita is present. I think I saw Donald Foster present. Emma Posadas present. Jerry Mead, I think, is present. I'm assuming she's iPhone. She had texted me. So anyways, yeah, Emma, I saw you as present and noted you as such. Jerry Mead, I think, is the iPhone. She said she was going to be muted. Let's see who else. John Marquez is here. Kevin Olson is here. Mark Robertson is here. Chris Inez is here. Dr. Sandoval, myself, I'm here. Tommy Frutos, Trustee Frutos is here. Jeffrey Weinstein is here. Ilda Sanchez is here. Is there anyone who I missed who is not on the committee or who is on the committee? That's the list I have. Okay. All right, we will go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I got a flag up and everything. All right, ready, begin. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. And so can I get a approval of the agenda? May I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All right, so I guess in either a show of hands or you can unmute yourself, say aye. All those who approve of the agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so the approval of the meeting minutes. I don't see any meeting minutes attached, so I'm going to skip this item since there's nothing to approve. So let's go ahead to the, oh gosh, the reading of the mission and vision statement. I'm going to take a little prerogative and just do our vision, right? Which is to serving every student every day, because I can't get to the mission right now. So with that in mind, let's get right into the discussion of chronic T absentee rate. And I'm not sure who's starting this. I think Dr. Garcia.
Yes, and so good afternoon, everyone, President, board members, and Strategic Planning Committee. So Dr. Bradley and I are going to be sharing about our chronic absenteeism and the SPUSD response. And I believe then Dr. Ramirez is going to come right after us with her presentation to add on to things about the outreach specialists. So this is our agenda today. We're going to quickly review some terms to know. I'll get into the data, and then Dr. Bradley will talk about the remainder of the items on the agenda. But first, we have some good news that Dr. Bradley is going to share.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be able to share that this is my third year here, and this is the first time that I ever received a CC on an email from the superintendent of Ventura County Public Education congratulating us on our decrease, a 6.7% reduction in chronic absenteeism from 32.6% in 2021 to 25.9% today. It shows how timely that the request was made for this discussion regarding absenteeism. It also is a nod to the amazing work and efforts that have been done to date, and hopefully it's a shot in the at the bow of what we'll see in the future as far as we try to improve our attendance and decrease our chronic absenteeism rate. So to begin, it's important to kind of talk about a few terms, because with chronic absenteeism, it's very easy to get things misunderstood, right? So we have two places that we live in. we live in the absenteeism world. So you have chronic absenteeism and you have truancy. So first, I want to have a brief, quick discussion on this idea of what does it mean to be chronically absent? So in the most succinct nutshell, a chronically absent student is a student who's missed 10%, or for us, 18-ish days of educational instruction. So if a student has missed 18 days, so when you see the numbers that Dr. Garcia is going to be sharing, she'll give you some insight on what that represents and what situation we're really finding ourselves facing. But most importantly, we want to make sure that we understand that chronic absenteeism is also categorized. It's not just about that 18, it's about who is below that mark so we can continue to support their great efforts, and who's above that mark so that we can give them more targeted intervention. And as you can see on the slide, we have various categories from excellent to severely chronic. An excellent student who is a student who's missed less than 1% of the instructional days. One of the things that we're going to be doing going forward is making sure that each student within Santa Paula Unified School District is keenly aware not only of what the target is, but what category they stand in. Without having that data and information, it's almost impossible for them to meet a target that they don't even know that they're trying to reach. And so we're going to make sure that they understand that if you're in that manageable space, then you've missed between 5 to 9.9%. Now, it's also important to know that we'll be having a different response depending upon the category of the student so that it can be tailored to their individual needs. We've already talked about what chronic is, being that 18-day mark. And then we have a small segment of the population that goes well beyond that mark, and they miss more than 20% of the instructional days. And these are the individuals that we most likely see in our SARB. So let's talk about truancy, because at times, as many of you know, we send letters through A2A. And through that process, sometimes parents can be confused and they say, wait a minute, I called you each and every time, and I told you that my child was absent. My child was not truant. And as you can see here, the definition of truancy, though, is a student who has 3 full days in one school year or more than a 30-minute period during a school day 3 times without a valid excuse. So this is that individual that could hit this one or two ways. They may be that they were absent the entire day, or they may have been late 30 minutes, and we say periods specifically for our secondary that have period attendance. And so these individuals would be considered truant. And while many believe that only truants trigger letters, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, in actuality, the chronic absenteeism trigger letters as well and initiates our SART and SARB response. Speaking of those two, these are acronyms that many are familiar with, and we have SART and SARB. And SART is the equivalent, the attendance equivalent. Think of it as the attendance equivalent of an SST, if you will. It's intended to be a meeting of the minds of administrators and other individuals who are singularly focused in coming up with a plan prior to coming to SARB. School Attendance Review Board is the district level response, which is in collaboration with VCOE, and we'll talk a little bit about that later about who those members are. So now that you have some basic terms and understand the difference, I'm going to kick it back to Dr. Garcia, who's going to get into some of the data.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Bradley. And Dr. Bradley may add to any slides if it's pertinent. So as we talk about chronic absenteeism rate, this is the current chronic absenteeism rate. And so what we have is we can see where Santa Paula Unified falls in comparison to Ventura as well as statewide. So we are at 25.9% in comparison to the state. We are about 0.5% higher. And then in relationship to Ventura, Ventura is lower than the chronic absenteeism rate for the state. Now, one thing that I do want to emphasize, and it was that good news that Dr. Bradley shared at the beginning of this presentation, And so with us dropping by 6.7% from last year we would have been at, or we were at 32.6%. Next slide, please. This is just a bar graph showing the same data that we saw on the previous slide. Next slide. Moment. On this slide, we can see the chronic absenteeism by school. And so what I'd like to highlight here is that thinking about our chronic absenteeism rate at 25.9%, we can see that Isbell, McKevitt, and Santa Paula High School are less than the 25.9% that we see for Santa Paula Unified School District, and also are below the state chronic absenteeism rate, whereas all of the other schools are at more than 25.9%. And what we'll hear about later in the presentation is to look at, some of those interventions. Next slide. And so this right here is an attendance rate comparing last year at this given date range of 8/10 to October 2nd, and the same date range for 2023. And so what you can see is our district attendance rate last year was at 94.9%, and where it is this year is at 94%. And so then you can see exactly what is happening at every school site if you look at the rows from last year to this year. And so you can see BW went up slightly, Blanchard went down, Grace Thill went up slightly, Thill went up, etc. And so that's how you read this, right? So that attendance rate is increasing. So that is a good thing if it did increase from last year to this year. Next slide. So this right here is additional data. And so these are the sources of the data that has been seen in this presentation. And so if we click on, for example, attendance rate, and what we're going to do is just show you what this is. All of you have access to these documents. And so, Dr. Bradley, do you want to talk a little bit about those items in red?
Sure. Thank you. This is actually a very important tool that gives you an idea of the impact, not only of schedule changes, of things that are happening within the community, and what might we do slightly different in response to it. So if you look, for example, you see on August, the first thing you have before you, and I'll try to make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it, is the district attendance for August and September and October. If you see white, that's what we were looking for. We don't want to see that. Green is well below average. It's not doing bad, but red is where Houston, we have a problem. And all of you can probably think back in your brain about what might have happened on the 21st. And just for interaction's sake, anybody have an idea what was the 21st of August? Anybody remember?
It was after the earthquake and hurricane.
Earthquake, hurricane. Yes, we had a lot going on that day. So much so that 1,500 students stayed back. All right. And so what was interesting is that we did some meetings with the principals, and we'll talk about principals and their teams and administrators and their teams. And we'll talk about it a little bit later. But what was interesting is when you start to disaggregate the data going further and seeing subtle nuances in schools, one, we obviously are seeing, especially starting in October, we're starting to see a trend that we didn't see before, which is this Monday-Friday connection of students who are starting to get into the habit of taking off Mondays and Fridays. And that's something that we need to really drill down to. Another thing of import, though, is that on, I believe, October 10th, we started to see a pattern in some sites. So you see, for example, this was BW. On the 10th, they were in the red. Anybody remember what happened on or about the 10th? Or was it a significant day?
Indigenous People Day.
Exactly.
I had
And
to text
so,
Dr. Bradley on that day for those.
I thought that was the
Yes.
Monday.
well, here's the thing. Whatever day it was, be it the 9th, that's why I said on or about. People believe because other school sites took it off, other districts took it off, that the 10th was not a school day. So many of our families decided to either take it off because they thought it was closed or in celebration or honor of the day. So having said that, we would want to start thinking about the implications of that day and how our community responds to it, because it was something that was a pattern that was noticed. Towards the end of the year, we'll be sharing this information with you so that hopefully it also informs future calendaring and other important things. Because, for example, last year, we saw a pattern of 2 days after October 31st, a big dip. And I'm assuming that the candy started to kick in and kids either started getting sick or wiry and they weren't coming in. So there's certain things that you want to make sure you're paying attention and looking at. So that's a quick nutshell of this data. And then I'm going to go back to the main screen and just give you a quick kind of like look at some of the other information that is useful because it helps us drill down. So what you see here is a summary of the A2A conferencing as of 10/13/23. And what this is intending to show, and I will tell you this, as we had these meetings, some things started to come out, including but not limited to, we need more training, for example, on A2A, because some of these numbers weren't indicative of the true efforts that were happening at the school sites. But according to A2A, only 30% of our conferences of SART eligible students have been held. And we'll talk about it a little bit later. And so you can see, for example, Santa Paula High School has conducted. Red are the ones that are to be scheduled. Blue is in progress. And 7 and the light blue are the ones that have been closed. And so you can see we have a lot of work to do in that regard. And then lastly, and I'm going to invite Dr. Garcia to jump back in with this, since we definitely want to talk about some of the surprises that we saw on this one too. And we'll probably tag team a little bit on this one.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, Dr. Bradley. So what you are seeing here is the source of the attendance rate. And so one of the positives is with kindergarten. And so that is something to be noted, is that we see improved attendance rates in kindergarten. Dr. Bradley, do you want to go into any more detail about that?
No, I think that was the main takeaway, that we're seeing an improvement in an unexpected place. And we definitely want to make sure that as we continue to try to develop the habits of mind and encouraging great attendance, that we honor and celebrate those parents who are doing something that is beyond what we expect. But then we also identify some of the pain points and make sure that we have a strategic plan. And obviously, just as you can tell, the 0% is because the 6th graders moved to the 6th graders. This is their first year there at the elementary schools.
And one thing that I didn't mention on a previous slide that I want to make sure to mention here is that Dr. Bradley and I had a discussion about on incentive days with the elementary schools. There is no noted higher attendance. And so there are implications there for what our plan is moving forward with regard to incentivizing attendance, as well as, for example, like field trips, placing field trips on predictably low attendance days, so that we can see a boost in attendance, because nobody wants to miss a field trip. So I'll go ahead and I will now pass it over to Dr. Bradley, and she will go into the SART and SARB process.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about SART and SARB. And in the interest of full transparency, we are on a journey of continuous improvement. And so we see a healthy, robust SARB program that is lauded by the district attorney, VCOE, et cetera. They come and they give us compliments about our SARB process. And that's due in no small effort to the amazing administrators and the work at the school site. We have individuals who are part of this team, including Mr. DeCandia, who really are at the forefront of really making sure that the SART process, which leads to the SARB process, is robust. So where do we have this need in this area for growth? As we know, our admin team and the site are richly scheduled and they're facing things that they've never faced before. Nonetheless, we still have to have a laser-like focus on preventative measures that ensure that the student doesn't get to the point where they need this tier 3 intensive intervention in the form of SARB, because SARB is a very labor-intensive process on all parties, and it'd be much better if we could try to support them earlier and often before they get to this point. So as I mentioned before, SART is that site-based intervention. It's intended to be a meeting of the minds. And as a former principal, I understand it can be very hard to get an administrator and a team together. But the number one predictor of whether or not the student improves, good, bad, or otherwise, is the ability for them to hear from the administrator, and actually more specifically the principal. And we know that's not always easy to do. However, that weight of it helps explain the gravity. But that's why we want to leverage some of the other resources that we have within our district before we get to that point, right? And so I'm going to briefly explain SART. And as you can see on the screen, it's a 10 to 15 minute site-based meeting. What we're finding is the very interventions that we're coming up with in SARB would have been best identified in SART. And so what we're starting to realize is that not only does it require additional training, and I can definitely say without a doubt, while we have more access to the site members with the new scheduling and the different days, to be honest, I really could utilize more access to them to be able to get the training that they need on the site level. And so, but having said that, we work with what we have. I'll talk a little bit about the meetings that we had recently, and they were well received universally. Everyone was like, I want more and more of this digging into data and time together so that we can move forward. It's supposed to change behavior. We do the attendance contract, and this is where we're going to be doing the linkages to services. Now, if that doesn't work, then we go on to the SARB process. And the SARB process is a machine. If you haven't been a part of that process, not only does the district get to start working on it weeks in advance to make sure that they're meeting all compulsory deadlines and notification timeframes, it really is a Goliath effort of the district attorney, probation, public health, you name it. We have a very large team that comes in and gets together, and they stay in a room from 8 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. going through SARTs 2 to 3 times a month. So it by itself is a machine. Similarly to the SART process, yes, we have an attendance contract, but this is really intended to say, hey, listen, we're at that point of no return, and you need to understand the legal ramifications associated with your lack of attendance, if your lack of going to school. During this time, if we haven't had it identified before, we bring in special education if the student is receiving special education services. If we find out the student is experiencing homelessness, we would obviously offer a transportation and other support to assist them, be it food and other items. Sometimes we find out that the student lives beyond 2 miles from our local from the school that they're assigned to. And per board policy, we then offer them transportation. And although only a couple of students are participating in that, it is a game changer. It's not cheap, but it is a game changer. And so it's something that's very important. We also let them know that what the next steps are, and it's including but not limited to being sent to court. They have to understand that if you don't do what's necessary and take advantage of the resources we're providing and asking for the help that your child needs, you could receive a ticket. We're very proud to say that we have been, per my request, we are getting kudos from the DA, and they're sending notes to the school sites directly and applauding them when their student gets their ticket dismissed. And most recently, Isbell Middle School got some kudos on a student, and we had a couple of others. And now they're doing that VCOE wide, because I felt that was important. If you're telling me at this meeting where it's just 10 of us here on the Zoom that this is happening, let's celebrate it widely and broadly in the classroom and at the site. And it really makes a big difference. So this is not meant for you to read. I know that it's very small on the left-hand side. It's just more of a visual. But the right here where it's hyperlinked, where it says SP letter triggers, this is a direct link to this document should you want to see it in its original form. And just really quickly, what this is intended to do is to give you an idea when are letters triggered for attendance, excessive absences versus truancy. And just really quickly, it's not anything complicated. It's just literally you get letter 1 after 3 truancies, and excessive absence after 7. So that's where that letter 1 comes in. Letter 2 is 6 absences, 6 truancies, or 10 excessive absences. And then obviously with respect to conferences, you want a SART truancy after 6, and an excessive absences meeting after 10. But I say that the schools that are even more proactive than that, they are seeing a bigger result, because there is a slight disconnect between the A2A timeframes and the timeframes at our school site. And then lastly, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the meeting that we held with each school site. And in order to make sure we were available to the students, both myself and Erica Jimenez ran this meeting 3 times consecutively, and we did it again on the next day. It was a really great meeting of the minds, and we met with principals, assistant principals, clerks, and a couple of the outreach specialists to get feedback on our new SART documents. We are committed to getting away from the oral tradition that is sometimes here in Santa Paula, and we want everything in writing. And so we are providing an opportunity for stakeholder buy-in by giving them a chance to give feedback on our SART guide and our SART contract. But one of the most important things that came out of that time was the meeting of the minds and the sharing of information. And what you see over to the left is information regarding some of the strategies, many of which that are shared by both sites, by all sites, but some of the amazing strategies that they're doing. Jeff Madrigal had shared that he went to a visit of another school, and one of the innovative things that they were doing is they actually shared the data every day. And how did they do that? It was very low tech and simple. They had a big dry erase board in the front of the school, and they shared what was the attendance yesterday, what's the target for today, and how many more students need to be present tomorrow. And that made a big difference in that school's attendance, and it's something that we could potentially take. We also see that there are islands of excellence, and we want to find out what those individual sites are doing so that we can glean from it and make sure that we get more information going forward. So now we're going to talk a little bit about district supports, and I'm going to focus on the supports from the district. And then while I do have information on the outreach specialists, after we finish, we'll turn it over to Dr. Ramirez for her portion. So it's important to know that we have been growing and making sure that the district support systems are focused without fail on attendance. And so it's obviously with me, I oversee many of the aspects of attendance, and that is including but not limited to being the VCOE liaison. Our program specialist, I have to say, it would be almost impossible for me to do what I do without her. She is the primary runner of the SARB meetings. And without her support, it would be almost impossible to be able to hold as many meetings as we do. We tag team, but for the most part, she takes that yeoman's effort on, and it makes a great difference. She also engages in data analysis and provides training. We also have our district level outreach specialist, and she focuses on tier 3 chronically absent students. She participates in the SARB, and she does linkages for students experiencing homelessness, special education, you name it. She's there to be a support to the sites and the site level outreach. One thing that you may not have realized is that if we have a student that's chronically absent, this might be indicative of a health problem. And so our district nurses are now being looped into the response, so that if we have someone who is chronically absent, then we need to find out, Is it allergies? Do you need medication? Do you need some sort of assistance coming up with a appointment? What support do you need? Is it nutrition? What's going on so that we can get that help? So they also will now begin making phone calls to help support the work that's already happening with the outreach specialists, with the attendance clerks, and everyone at the school site. And obviously our executive assistant, she is the person that does the coordination of the SART process. There are a gazillion legal letters that have to be printed, mailed, and distributed, as well as making sure that all the members of the team are where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be. And so that kind of gives you a summary of the supports that are happening at the district level. Dr. Ramirez will talk about outreach specialists. So we'll go ahead and talk about what's on the horizon. So it's important to know that we are now going to be doing monthly attendance team meetings. We found great benefit in having the different school sites together so that they could hear from each other and see how they analyze the data differently. And I want to put more tools in their toolbox. So what we're going to do, though, is that we're going to do it based upon their needs. I'm going to be going and meeting with them along with Dr. Gillette and the outreach specialists will be meeting together to find out, do you want the monthly site level meeting, plus maybe a quarterly or every couple of month time to get together overall so that we can check in on our strategy. We can decide if the data is moving in the right direction and if any tweaks are getting made, or would you like us to focus laser like on your site specifically? So we're going to make sure we're listening to them and giving them specifically what we need. We also utilize the LCAP funds to provide and to purchase the A2A incentive program. So there is going to be communications that are targeting those students who are doing super well to help them keep it up. And then there's going to be some targeted stuff for the individuals who are slipping. And so their data is pretty robust in other districts that are near us and the impact of that. So we'll be able to share the impact of that as well. Lastly, we're going to be going into a deeper data analysis. As we know, if we don't inspect what we expect, how can we prove impact? And one of the key things that we value is finding out, is our efforts making a difference? We already know that we're moving in the right direction with respect to chronic absenteeism, but we don't want to just assume that it's because of our efforts. It could be an adjustment after COVID, but what I do know is that we have been working hard on attendance. So I know I can prove some of I can at least with reasonable certainty share that there is a positive impact of the work that we're doing. And then we're going to be more intentional about recognition and celebration. And so this will also be important in making sure that everyone develops the culture of excellence and accountability for the attendance that they provide. Now, we had space for questions, but since we know that Dr. Ramirez is also going to be sharing information. Oh, yes, Dr. Garcia.
Yes, and we'll pass it to Dr. Ramirez in just a moment. I just wanted to add something to make sure that everyone understands just what ADA means. So it's annual daily attendance. And in terms of calculating average daily attendance in California, that's the total number of days of student attendance divided by the total number of days in the regular school year. And so a student attending every day would equal 1 ADA. And ADA is not the same as enrollment, which is the number of students enrolled in each school and district. And our base grant funding is tied to that. And so I want to make sure to make that link between our attendance and our funding base.
Very good. And so we know that there may be questions. It's up to your pleasure if you would like to ask us our questions first or after we hear from Dr. Ramirez.
Why don't we just go ahead and hear from Dr. Ramirez, and then we'll get into discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And, and today I get to share all the great and wonderful things that our outreach specialists have been working on. Again, this is our first year that we have our outreach specialists, but and we're all learning together. So we do meet monthly, and we are very grateful for all the support that we've received from Dr. Bradley's office to be able to ensure that we're right on track as to what the vision of her department is in regards to attendance. So just to let you know, we do have, now we have 6 outreach consultants at the moment, or specialists. Juan has been here already with Renaissance for the longest time, but I still wanted to include him because he's been instrumental in supporting all the outreach specialists as they started their journey here with us. So, and you can see that our outreach specialists, they share schools, and the way we schedule the days is based on the chronic absenteeism that we had last year. So when Dr. Bradley's office provided me with the information of chronic absenteeism, then we focused the support where it was needed. So here are the responsibilities. Their goal is to relationship with parents and communities, to develop a parent ambassador program, develop parent universities. Here is, I'll just click on this link here for Santa Paula High School. They have a list of activities that they want to do. It's all set for the school year. So they had one back to school night, why attendance matters, and then supporting students, athletes, and school resource officers. And so we were happy that the commander was able to come out and meet with our parents on that day. And so we also have ISBEL. ISBEL also has their parent university on their website. Oh, sorry, I didn't link the right one. I apologize. I will link the correct one. But ISBEL also has started. So they've been very conscious of having monthly meetings with their parents, and the elementary is also working on their schedule. We work on implementing a coffee chat with principal to really provide that bridge with our parents and our school's office. Attendance, again, their focus is truly increasing attendance, making sure that kids come to school. How are we going to create that culture, be part of the SST process, the START process especially, and then also develop a plan to improve school culture and school connectedness, because we know that research says that when kids and parents feel connected to school, they will do better. So that has been our main goal for this school year. So here's our attendance incentives so far. We're really excited because, I try to we have so many pictures. ISBEL I have a lot of pictures from ISBEL of everything that they do during recess, during with the wellness center, that they really encourage the kids to come to school. They have activities for them to do all the time. They painted like little bags for Halloween, and so they're doing Halloween grams. They're just have a galore of things to be able to really improve attendance at the middle school. And then one of the great things that the outreach specialist at Grace Still is that they started the Grace Still Best Attendance of the Week. And this group of students that you hear went to school every single day. So 21 of these students did not miss a day. And because they wanted to get the trophy and they wanted to get the popcorn party. So we know that that's really important. And all of our specialists, when we meet once a month, we all build on each other's strengths and say, okay, what are you doing at your school? How can I make it happen at my school? And so everybody is really working together to increase more of these incentives. Again, during the week, have the monthly challenges, and just like with Dr. Garcia, finding ways, like Dr. Garcia said, finding ways that will motivate our kids to want to be in school and not to miss one day. And then, so here's the data. So I know that Dr. Bradley shared the data from A2A, and this is the data from our own. Our specialists have been inputting all their information into visits into our Q system, and then we maintain a log of what they do. And it seems maybe that we would want to see bigger numbers in some schools, but there were some issues in the beginning with getting their phones to work and things like that. But once everything was settled, it's picked up. So you can see that the big focus is attendance. Those are all the biggest numbers that we have. This is just elementary, and then our phone calls. And then we do make referrals, to different organizations, or even we reach out to Dr. Bradley's office to talk about when we have a student who's homeless or who's about to experience some homelessness. Then we reach out to her office so they could be able to provide them with some resources. We've had some home visits. which is really exciting to be able to do. And they partner with each other to go visit site homes, or they ask the district outreach specialist if they can accompany them. And also the principals, assistant principals will go with them. And then here, they've already, this is from data from August to October, they've had some SART meetings already at the elementary, 5, 6, I'm sorry. So we are working slowly, but we're getting there. And then here's the data from the middle and high school. And you can see the middle and high school, they're working very, very, hard to be able to make sure that they support the kids. At the high school, they've done 17 home visits, 116 referrals. She's made 394 phone calls, and then everything that has to do with attendance, 329. And the same thing, and I can't commend, Mr. DeCandice here, so I'll highlight all the hard work that he does to be able to get those 83 SART meetings with, along with Jessica, to really connect with kids, figure out a way to, why are you not coming? And do we need to give you an alarm clock so that you can come to school? Do I have to call you in the morning, call your mom or dad so that you can be here? So they are doing whatever it takes to make sure that kids are coming to school. And it really does take the support of the administration and our outreach specialists to work together. And then if they say, Gina, can you buy us snacks so that kids can want to come to school? Yes, we'll buy you snacks. Whatever it takes to get the kids to come to school, we will do. And so that's the data that I wanted to highlight, that they really are working hard and being diligent about reaching out to our students. And so here is that actually I got access to A2A, which I was so excited. Thank you, Dr. Bradley. And our outreach specialists will get training on this as well. But I was able to see that, this compares to last year during this time. And you can see we have a lot of green already, right? That we are seeing some gains in many of the schools. And I have to tell you that at Barbara Webster, being that Barbara Webster is now a sports academy, kids don't want to miss because they want to play. They want to, be ready to practice. So it's really exciting to see that, the decrease of their absenteeism go down. And I do attribute that to the sports academy, as well as to all the efforts that are going on with that piece. And Glen City, we went down by 26%. So it's like really exciting. We do see, where Isabel looks like it went up, but which is really when I was shocked when I saw this, because I see how hard they're working. They're making sure that every parent has Parent Square. They're calling, they're having SART meetings, they're having all these different things during nutrition. So we got to figure out what's going on so that we can best support, the school, as well as Santa Paula High. There's a higher number as well. And so again, but those are the areas where we need to figure out what can we do to support our specialists in being able to continue to increase and reduce the absenteeism. But I was very happy to see that all the efforts are really paying off as we look at all the green that we're reducing. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and just a small snapshot of all the hard work that our specialists are doing. But we are meeting monthly, and if we need to change to meet bi-weekly, which is what was our last conversation, we will do that. But we want to make sure that we stay with the vision of the district to truly reduce chronic absenteeism and ensure that kids want to come to school and do their best. So now I turn over to open it up for questions. Dr. Sandoval?
All right, everybody. I really would love to, I got a host of questions, but I'm going to hold off on that. Because I'd like to hear from teachers and staff about, their view on how things are working, and, we should really focus on, some of the other things we could be potentially doing to continue to get, doing better. So I wanted to open it up to the floor to see if anybody would like to add their perspective on how they see things. Or is that too intimidating while we're being recorded?
I'll chime in, Dr. Sandoval. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Bradley, Dr. Ramirez, Dr. Garcia, for the presentation. It warms my heart because, you know, being an educator, being a former outreach counselor, it's wonderful to hear a movement that's that we're making changes, we're making positive gains and whatnot. I do agree with Dr. Sandoval. I would love to hear from staff where you would like to see some positive changes, and how can you integrate your outreach specialists at your school site to best meet your needs? Because, you know, being an outreach specialist, you can be versatile. You're in the community. You're addressing attendance. You're addressing social emotional needs. You know, but that being said, I mean, I think the information presented today was positive, and I just want to give kudos to Mr. Weinstein and the leadership team, and all the way down for you know, just we're stepping in the right direction, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
All right, well, whenever anybody wants to jump in, you know, on anything, please do.
Dr. Sandoval, can I just
Yeah.
mention one thing?
Sure.
Dr. Garcia did a good job of talking about our funding. So basically, if you just break everything down, every day a student attends, we get about $92. So it's between $16,000 and $17,000 a year if they are full attendance. However, per ADA we get, but when we're talking about incentivizing attendance, our goal is to, you know, for every extra day we can get a child to come in, it's $92. So we do want to put part of our budget towards incentivizing, whether that's parties, whether I saw in the chat school competitions and stuff like that, you know, having the Kona ice truck, whatever, come if things are improving, in order for us to, you know, recoup some of that lost income from the ADA.
You know, and what I would say is too on that is not just to do school competitions, although I think that that's a good thing. But I was thinking about like Renaissance's rate, you know, their rate's going to be high, you know, I think just by the nature of who's going there, you know, even if you can have like improvement parties, right? Like you guys were at 30 and now you're at 28, like let's celebrate that too. So, you know, they don't have to be the best, right? They just need to, but that improvement would help too, I think. Just something to think about. So
My last year at Santa Paula High School, Dr. Garcia, you'll remember we did a competition. If you were perfect attendance from the end of fall break to winter break, because that's usually a time a lot of students miss, we had an ice cream party. It was pretty good. We had a lot of students not miss. It was only like 19 days between that, but that was a positive incentive for them.
And if I could add, one of the things that we had spoken about is this concept of just because you're on track to be quote unquote chronically absent doesn't mean you have to end the year that way. And so to DeCandia's point about having incentives to try to, you know, recoup them towards the end and using our Saturday schools and any other things that we can do, I think it's important for the students to know that, not saying we want to say, oh, you get 18 days, you can take off, obviously not, but they do need to know that if you missed 18, what is the impact of that? And so I think that that's important, you know, when we think about this idea of how can we catch them before we get to the end of the year, and they're in that category.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Bradley also brought up early in the presentation just the importance of communication and bringing it to the attention of students so that they have an awareness of where they stand so that we can prevent them from becoming chronically absent. You
know, there were definitely, you know, some things that I did take. So I'll just mention some things in the chat, right? Like, so the school competitions, being transparent, I think makes a big difference too. An agreement with the improvement versus perfect, it is true, right? Many kids are not at fault for not being at school. One thing I would say to that is I think one thing I'd like to see our outreach workers do is give presentations, in the community, like go to Guadalupe Church, on a Sunday and have a little 5-minute, because it would be easy. They would certainly welcome us, right, to talk about the importance of getting your kids to school and, the attendance or other things like, letting them know about preschool and stuff and what have you, right? But this could be one of those things so that, the community in general can support, these families that are probably having trouble, or, them understanding, yeah, when we take our kid out for, a couple weeks, that's going to impact, their schooling, and maybe we should think twice or rearrange things. Some other chat things. Love the idea of putting the whiteboard out there. I think that's great. Right. I think that was wonderful. And I think in general, the more we're collaborating across sites, not just on attendance, right? But this is a good example of that kind of synergy we can get. But we need to do more of that cross-site pollination, not just at the administrator level, right? At the teacher and the staff level too. So that we can be sharing like what is working and what's not and what other strategies. So again, that whiteboard I think is a great one. Maybe a school-wide reward if the goals are met. Yeah, that sounds good. Some other things, just Dr. Garcia agreeing with me, right? And with Mr. Rosales mentioned that. And some real bilingual outreach would be helpful, right? Which I guess is what I was kind of getting at when, with the quote unquote Guadalupe example. Wondering how our Spanish speaking population consume local news, maybe social media, right? And then Ms. Chari, the Bedelsiers reached out to our outreach specialists with concerns about being tardy and asked for support to be punctual. So those are all great things, right? I would want to see in terms of, say, some of the data, right? I would like to see that breakdown for those, the moderate, excellent, whatever, just to see, because it's not just once they hit chronic, right, we're in real trouble. But what is the intermediate steps, like the yellow, right? Not just the red. I would like to also see this broken down by our subgroups. SPED, EL, homeless, foster, even gender, right? I kind of wonder whether there's a difference between male and female attendance rates. So we can better understand, someone who is EL is going to have different, we're going to have a different approach than if someone's homeless, right? So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see the DF rates and the GPAs for each group, so we can see and share the impact on schooling, right? When you aren't coming to school, your GPA is going to be a 1.0, right? Versus if you even get to the next group, you might be at a 2.5. So that's some data that I'd like to see. Let's see, social media is a great idea. Some kudos are speaking about their upcoming trips to Mexico. Those trips are pretty long. We do, right? They are. We're going to see that dip. I'll stop because I still have more, but I'll take a breath if anybody else wants to chime in.
I was just going to chime in, and it was something that Dr. Bradley was talking about with regard to identifying, if you remember the graph where it had, the green and the red, where those red dates are days that we can target. And so some of those days that we can potentially target would be like maybe right before vacation, and for and incentivizing having like perfect attendance, for maybe a number of weeks upon return. So I think we can take some of those ideas that are suggested. I wanted to maybe just highlight, I know Isabel, because we obviously saw an improvement, and of course I'm going to put Robert on the spot. So Mr. DeCandia, was there anything, any good ideas for incentives or things that were done at Isabel from last year in the 22-23 school year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the wellness room, as Dr. Bradley pointed out, it was a huge hit. Mr. Softy's, echoing off Lydia's computer, Mr. Softy's days were a good idea. And now if you have 10 Condor books, Mr. Softy comes once a month. Those are days students really come. Just the whole ASB coming out at lunch, playing music, games, fun events. We made school, I think, fun last year, and we had good results. And then Saturday school, we had maybe 2 Saturday schools a month at Isabel. I know the high school does it every Saturday. I covered last Saturday and maybe 120 students. That was really good to see. But Isabel was averaging near 100, maybe in the 70s. So that helps recover the ADA. But ultimately, fun, safe environment, I think, is what really helped Isabel last year. Oh yeah, our little bootgram. So we do monthly. Well, it is perfect attendance. I know we were looking at improving, which is a great idea as well, but we do monthly little tiny incentives. So that was attached to a very small Rice Krispie treat. And it was the kids loved it. Our school would be spooky without you. The month before, there was your attendance is on fire, and it was attached to a baked hot Cheetos bag. And those go out on the first of the month. So that one Dr. Bradley showed you went out today. And the kids love it. They're still young when they're at middle school. Things like that make them happy.
Yeah, and good job with those A2A conferences. And just a note, and I don't know if Dr. Bradley wants to expound upon what I'm about to say, but there's a lag. And so in discussions with Dr. Bradley, A2A sometimes is behind where in its reporting where the data is. So I don't know.
The attendance clerk, Naomi, a lot of credit to her. We're ahead of A2A as far as I'm calling parents, having SART meetings before those letters are being sent. So we're incredibly organized when it comes to, I have made contact with every student that has an attendance issue so far this year.
And I'd like to just give kudos to Isabel. This year, they had their first rally, and where they did some celebrations of students who are on the honor roll. And there was like more than half of the auditorium the gymnasium was standing for students to get recognized. And so that is a huge incentive as well, and testimony to kids having fun at school and also being recognized for their good work. So I don't know, Dr. Bradley, if you wanted to add to anything or if I got that right.
No, you were right on target with that. So kudos and great job, guys.
So here's a question. So how do we know when a kid is getting lost in the system, right? Because the volume that we have, right, even at 25%, that's a lot of our students. And how do we know, right, that we are going to, that we've reached those kids? I mean, have we reached them all? Like, is that 100%, or are those kids, the workload is just too big and you're trying to get to as many as you can? Like, what do we need to do to improve the number of kids that are in that chronic, category, and them getting, the SART, right? Or even before that, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I'm gonna say Santa Paula High School, it is hard to keep up. There were, I felt like I was constantly looking at that number, and then I would hold 10 SART meetings, and the next day 10 more, and then I was like, oh, I chipped away at it a little, and then 2 weeks later the number's back higher again, and I'd be like, oh my gosh. constantly. The ISBEL is a little easier to manage. And I do think there is a, after, let's say you go through the whole SARB process and unfortunately student and parent is cited, you can't take them through the SARB process again, is my understanding. So at a school the size of a high school, it's almost like, all right, we took them through the process of SARB. It's November, December. Where do we go from there?
Well, just to clarify, is that once they're in the SARB process, while you can't restart, you can't hold over their head what they did the previous year. However, we do have 30-day and 60-day reviews for those students. And so to Dr. Sandoval, to get a little insight to your question, similarly to when you have an exorbitant D and F rate, it's almost impossible to have enough credit recovery to make a dent. You have to kind of prevent it from happening. So what what A2A and others say is that your best bet is to be laser-like focused on the students who are starting to develop the habit. And so our suggestion is that we leverage all the different pieces of our puzzle for each group. So for example, yes, it's hard for our attendants to make all of the phone calls, but if we are disaggregating the data as you suggested, then we can say, okay, this group gets called by the first line of defense. When the first line of defense either runs out of time and can't, then the second line of defense is, for example, the outreach specialist. The outreach specialist, when they talk, they're now going to be giving more specific scripts and things and questions to ask, because it's our belief that every time you interact with them, you need to connect them to a service and you need to get some data about them. So then what we'll be doing is saying, okay, no, now you need to go get bumped up to the district and you need to talk to the nurse. So what we're starting to develop as we meet with the different sites is, what is that approach going to be in the very beginning? How can we catch them early? And those who are far gone, what can we do to throw the kitchen sink at them, with the understanding that we may not necessarily, if it's a long game for them, but we can catch those ones who are just starting to do poorly and try to hit them hard and fast to get them to improve their behavior and their outcomes.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? So I would like to see a documented workflow on that, and that would be a great presentation to the board at some point. But I did want to I agree with Donald here. We need to start celebrating the small wins and not just those are consistently present. I agree with that, in so many ways. Like the most improved is progress, right? It's a start, But one thing that you touched on is the nurses, right, on the physical health. But, one of the other things that I know I see when we get kids that are expelled, right, they usually have chronic absenteeisms too, right? So, I'm worried about their mental health, right, their behavior, any trauma that they might have been suffering, bullying. So there's a whole host of other issues that might be keeping kids, from coming to school. How are we dealing with that? Like, where do you even start, right? Triaging that.
Well, if I could just add in real quick, one of the challenges that I found this year is that I've had students I want to refer to services or agencies, and these students haven't been given a warning letter about attendance and that kind of thing. And so when I looked into it, I had two students. One had received warning letters. The other student actually had more absences, but was not given any warning letters. And when I talked with the attendants about it, they told me, oh, that student's dealing with some physical health issues. But because there were no referral letters, I wasn't able to move forward with the referral.
If I may, in a situation such as that, so we have what we call a suppression. So if we know that a student is going through an extensive, ongoing, pervasive challenge, then we try not to necessarily hit them with the letters. However, If we know that, for example, someone's going to connect them to resources, we can manufacture the letter to be able to get that resource available. So all you have to do is reach out to me. I'm Bradley. Reach out to me in my office, and we can work on making sure that those individuals can still get the support that we're trying to get them. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. I will also add that one of the failings of A2A, and no system is perfect, is that in some cases they're glitching. So meaning there are situations like you said, maybe one kid has more absences than the other, but they don't have a reason why we're suppressing the letter and they didn't get a letter. What I've instructed the sites to do is to start collecting data and giving me examples of those individuals, because A2A is effective but costly. And so we're going to hold them accountable and say, hey, here's the data we're seeing. Make sure you fix it, because we expect nothing but 100% success on this, because it, again, is not cheap.
Heck yeah. Amen to that one. You know, and again, I think that part of it is just, you know, I would be interesting if you had any, you know, if there was anything else that we could be doing, right? So like, I would think that we would want to be monitoring these lists, like at least weekly, like, okay, is someone going into that yellow bucket, you know, the moderately, and I would also like to see, like in that suppression case, you know, teachers should be informed, I think, so that they know what's going on with their kids. And if, like, for instance, Rick, like if he knew they were suppressed or whatever, but he needs to get that referral, he can go reach out more proactively to you to say, hey, like, just to let you know, like, this is, you know, where we're headed on this. So, you know, anything, obviously it's just a district-wide, site-wide, whatever wide, you know, issue that we always have to keep on working on, that communication. But any way that we can formalize that so that it just is kind of part of what we do, you know, and part of that workflow. Sure, Dr. Garcia.
So on that note, just with your ideas about, you know, having a documented workflow of improvement, as well as wanting to see like our academic DF, you know, the DF rates alongside the attendance rates. One thing that we could do to begin to formalize, and of course it would take, you know, just some time to put that together, is to actually put together like an early warning system committee, right, where we are able to look at all of the facets of data. And of course, as we are learning to use Performance Matters, there are elements of Performance Matters that where we would be able to see this data side by side. So that might at least be an idea for moving in the direction of formalizing things, so that we are able to better identify students who have multiple indicators and then intervene on multiple levels.
I'm just going to mention one other thing, because you brought up transportation. There is a opportunity for us to collaborate with VCTC, Ventura County Transportation Committee. You know, we have a bus situation here, right? It's not great, but from what I've heard, like our students do use it or have used it more in the past. I don't know how well coordinated they are with our schedule, but we can have those conversations with them. There is, you know, potential that those routes are going to be changing, right? So we should be involved in that conversation. Or we should even make suggestions on, you know what, we have a bunch of students in one section that are having trouble getting, you know, to class or something. You know, if we can, you know, work with them and kind of fill at least some of the transportation holes that we might have, or that we might be facing, I think that that's an easy opportunity for us to do something that's not even coming out of our budget. The city pays for this service, so we should take advantage of it and work with them as best we can to make sure that our students are being served as effectively as we can. I do have other things, but in the interest of time, I do want to just one last time, if anybody else wanted to chime in. Any last questions? All right. I mean, this is hugely important, right? I mean, the monetary impact of chronic absenteeism is profound. You know, I'd kind of like to put a dollar on it, to see how much we do lose, because of that, and maybe advertise that. You know, I mean, our parents should know. You know, when you take your kid out of school, there's a cost to it. You know, it's not free, right? Not to us. So it'd be interesting to see kind of, actually, Mr. Olson, do you have a off the, you know, cuff answer of how much we might be losing? Right? If you don't, that's quite all right, right?
I could pull up a spreadsheet real quick.
Yeah, that's all right. You know, it's okay. Actually, I could, like, if we did have 4,800 students, right? And we have a 25% chronic, which is how many days? 20%, right? So 180, say 32 days out of the year, their absence at $97, about 3 million,
So 10% is your chronic.
10%. Okay. So half that, say like 1.5 million, 2 million. That's pretty substantial.
Mhm.
So anyways, Dr. Bradley, you have your hand up?
Yes, sir. One of the
Okay.
things I definitely support that. I just wanted to share some of the feedback that came back from the meetings that we had with each site. Was there was some pushback actually about the messaging. So if we do the dollar amount, I just suggest that we say
Interesting.
this is dollars that are not being able to service your kids, because the narrative that we got time and time again, which I had to kind of like push back on, was you just want them to come so you can get your money. Literally, I
Right.
heard that in several of the meetings. And so if we share it, we just want to make sure we're saying this prevented us from providing these many hours of tutoring, or, you know,
Well,
such.
I mean, and you're right. I mean, I kind of hadn't thought of that. All right. So maybe really the message is, you know, your kid doesn't show, they're not going to perform, you know, and show that instead, right? So it's take your kid to make sure your kid gets to class so they can be successful. You know, I think you're right. That's a more positive message, right? So anyways, all right. If there are no other comments, right? I do appreciate this conversation. Uh all right, so 5:14, we'll adjourn this meeting. So thank you all very much.